If you don't want to be recorded, then just turn off your video and you won't be recorded. Just your name will show up. Okay. So thank you everyone and welcome again to our fall lecture series. And we have Judy here is here in person. She's from Wisteria Place and she's been coming diligently every week. She crosses a little walkway and comes to the lecture. So welcome, Judy. And thank you to everyone from across Canada who's joining us. And we'll begin, I'd like to begin with the chanting of the Nembutsu. So if I could ask you, please join me in Gassho. Namo Amida Butsu. So as you know, we've been going over the Dhammapada, one of the earliest Buddhist texts. And it is generally regarded as one of the main Pali texts used for what we call Theravada Buddhism. If we break Buddhism down into two major groups, you have the Theravada and the Mahayana, which are the two major groups. And Theravada, if you want to think of it, they're a little bit more orthodox. And Mahayana tends to be a little bit more liberal in their understandings. There's many other different ways to describe it, but that's a very oversimplified way of understanding. So most of the Theravada schools are the schools of Buddhism that went through Southern Asia. So Sri Lanka, Myanmar, of course, India, Nepal. Nepal is unique, actually. Nepal is different. But those would be where the Theravada school mainly grew. And then the Mahayana school is a school that went through Northern Asia, China, Japan, Korea, and some other Theravada would be, Thai would be a Theravada school. And Vietnam is interesting because Vietnam has both Theravada and Mahayana schools in there. But so anyways, we've been going over this Dhammapada, and I think it's this Dhammapada has also become famous because it's transcended, if you will, even Buddhism, and you'll find quotes from it in various outside of Buddhism as well, because they make a lot of common sense, and they're good ethical and moral passages as well. So you'll find this being quoted quite frequently. You know, you'll find those little books that have all these various quotes from different religions, and because the Dhammapada is written in a way where it's these snippets of passages. And as I mentioned last week, they were actually passages that were said or quoted by the Buddha on various occasions. So even though we look at it as one body here, this is probably over his lifespan, or between the age of 35 to 80, as the Buddha would travel in the various places, and some incident would come up, and that's when Buddha would make a comment on those. So there were probably also, it wasn't probably just these quotes that he said, but he probably gave a discourse associated with the various quotes that he gave. So although we only see the short quotes, that's sort of like the summary of probably a whole talk that he gave. But it's the heart of what each of those talks that he was trying to talk about. So we're on number 11. As you can see, we've been going at quite a snail's pace, which is my per my usual way of doing things, seems like. Let's see, who do we have? Tanis, do you have the text with you?
Muted.
You have to unmute yourself, Tanis. There you go. Oh, we still can't hear you. I don't know why.
Volume.
We can't hear you for some reason. Sorry, Tanis, I don't know what's going on. So,
Oh, it's unmuted.
it is unmuted, but we can't hear her for some reason. So maybe I'll just ask somebody else. Sorry, Tanis, I'm just going to ask somebody else for the to save some time. Muddy, can I ask you to read number 11?
Okay. He who thinks of the unreal as real and the real as unreal will never reach the real, but will merely hold on to wrong views.
Okay, and Marilyn, can I ask you to read 12? Because they sort of.
He who sees the true as the true and the false as the false will reach the true and dwell in right thought.
Okay, thank you. So these are paired together, and it's obviously telling us that we have to seek what is true and real and not seek out that which is not true and real. In the Buddha's teachings, the Buddha actually talks, even when we have good intentions, we may not be following the true and real. And there's a couple of examples of this, or there's one example of this that it's one of my favorite tales that I tell the Dharma School children. And you probably heard me, those who have heard me talk to the children, give this talk. And it's about a group of monkeys. And this group of monkeys, where they live, it's so hot during the daytime that they normally sleep during the day, and then they go foraging for food in the evening. So one evening, as they were foraging for food, they come across this well. And the tiniest monkey looks down at the well, and at the bottom of the well, he sees a moon. And so he starts panicking, thinking the moon has fallen into the well. So of course, he calls all the other monkeys, and they all come by, and he explains how the moon has fallen into the well. Well, all the other monkeys look in the well, and sure enough, they see the moon at the bottom. So they start thinking, how can we save the moon? We have to save the moon. Well, one of the larger monkeys comes up with an idea, and he climbs into the well, grabbing onto the ledge of the well, and he tries reaching down to grab at the moon, but he can't get to the bottom of the well. So he tells another monkey to climb down his back and grab onto his tail and hang down from him and grab the moon. And of course, the next monkey tries this, but he still can't reach the bottom. And so pretty soon you get this chain of monkeys going down the well, trying to save the moon. And finally, it comes to the tiniest monkey. And so he climbs all the way down to the bottom, and he's able to reach the bottom. But of course, instead of grabbing the moon, all he's grabbing is water. And by this time, the top monkey, who was grabbing onto the ledge all this time, his arms are getting so tired that he couldn't hang on any longer, and he lets go. And so all the monkeys fall into the well, and they start yelling for help. And it said that along this time, the Buddha happened to come by and hears this commotion. And so he looks down and he sees all these monkeys splashing about. And so the Buddha gets a vine and puts it down the well, and the monkeys come crawling up one by one. And when they all get to the top, the Buddha looks at them and said, "What were you monkeys doing down in the well?" And of course, the little monkey says to the Buddha, the moon has fallen into the well. We are trying to save it. And to this, the Buddha gently smiles and points to the sky. And this is a fable that's told. And you obviously understand that what the monkeys were looking at was the reflection of the moon on the water in the well. And of course, their intention was good, but what they were lacking was the wisdom. Okay, so when we talk about the unreal and as the real, sometimes even when our intentions are good, if we're not doing it based on truth, we can still be misguided. Okay, so there are, from my perspective or your perspective, you might think, oh, these people that are anti-vaxxers, vaccination people, they're terrible. They should get, everybody should get vaccinated. But on the other hand, maybe they feel there is a true fear that they have towards it. And here we begin to start to think what is true and what is real. And so are we really better off getting vaccinated, or are we not? Or are we better? Is it something scary? You can have these arguments. So even though we think we're correct in getting vaccination, who knows, maybe 10 years from now, we might find out that there might be some side effects that we didn't know about. But those are the things that we have to deal with. So trying to find the truth is always the most important and most difficult thing to do, because often we only see snapshots of things as they go by. The other example that's used, and this one actually is not about good intentions, but there's another fable, and again, it's of a well. But what it is that there's a robber who's running away from the royal guards, and he is chased. And so he escapes into the well, hanging down a rope in the well. And as he's hanging down there, hiding from these guards, he notices at the bottom of the pit that there are some vipers, snakes, sitting there, waiting for him to come down. So he's just hanging on to his dear life. And he looks up and he sees two mice, a white mouse and a black mouse. And they start gnawing away at the rope above him. But at the same time that he notices the mice, he notices even further up, there's a tree branch that overhangs the well. And there's a beehive in that tree branch. And from that tree branch, from that beehive, honey is dripping out. And it's dripping right onto his face. And the honey falls into his mouth. And he begins to think, oh, how tasteful this honey is. It's the tastiest thing I've ever had. And he forgets his predicament, and all he thinks about is the good taste of the honey. So this is actually another parable that's told. And it's telling us, of course, this robber is basically each of us. And the white mouse and the black mouse is actually night and day. And it's our time is getting cut short all the time. And yet, because of this honey that's dripping into our mouth, we forget to realize the true reality that we're in. And we just are enjoying the pleasure of this moment without realizing the unsteadiness of our existence. So again, here, they're talking about what is true, or what is unreal and what is real. So being mindful always, or trying to be mindful of what is real, gives us a balance in our lives. So we don't get carried away, and we don't get swayed by the various things that happen in our lives, like our youth, our beauty, etc. All these things, right? And I think, this is much easier. I think I look at the majority of the audience that are joining, and I think all of you understand this much better than when I try to talk to a 20-year-old who's at the peak of their physical health. Now, as we age, we begin to our bodies change, and we realize the impermanence of our own existence. Yeah, so he who sees it true as the true and the false as the false will reach the true and dwell in right thought. So again, where did I see that? There's a store here somewhere in Richmond. I can't remember where I saw it now. But they have, it's called the anti-aging store. Have any of you seen this store? I'm not exactly sure. I haven't gone in. I'm kind of curious to know what they are selling, but it's one of those things where you're being sold something that actually is very unnatural. And yet we're being told that this is what we have to aspire to, right? In fact, the reality is all of us do age and all of us do go old. We may act young, we may look young, but it's natural actually to grow old. And the right thought here is to accept the changes that are going in life and to come to peace with that change. I think that's a very difficult thing to do because we don't like the change when it comes to our own demise or our frailty. I think it is something that we're all concerned about. But that's something, as the Buddha says, we have to be mindful of. We have to be mindful of those changes so that we can appreciate even more the moment that we have right now. Okay, so is there any comments about or questions about those two?
Question, but discussion.
Sensei, I was reading today, the Queen was meant to be with the Anglican Church, the Synod, as they have every 5 years. I read that they bring all the bishops together and they talk about what they expect to do and how the church, the Anglican Church in the UK, and the Queen is the head of the church.
Okay.
And we know that lately there's been discussion in the press, etc. She's missed this and that because of some health issues. And then today she spoke to them by Zoom, and she basically said what you're saying. I'm sure she's tired of reading about how she's getting old and oh my, they're worried about succession, etc., etc. And she basically said, and I'm paraphrasing here, we all have to accept that with our age, our great age, because she's 95 now, that certain conditions will be, and she will pass, and they will change. And I thought, yes, the expectation, there's all the worry around her, not just her aging and her ill health, but when she does die, and when she passes away, what will happen, in the UK? She's been there for will be 70 years as the monarch. So I thought that was rather interesting because, you know, passing on the wisdom or whatever it is, she's been there for such a long time. There's worry, there's anxiety around the death of the matriarch, of the queen, as there is in our families, the death of our, especially with the, as you pointed out, the ages that some of us are. And, but she said the faith was in, for her, the faith in her passing was her faith, which transcended everything. That's what it was about, not if she's well enough to attend this ceremony or that ceremony. So just to have that the queen too, just like we've heard, even the queen is, don't worry everyone, this is not a natural process.
I wonder, maybe I'll toss this out for you. Do you think as we age and many of our contemporaries pass away, does that make it any easier for you to accept change?
Me personally? Or all of it?
I'm thinking others maybe get others to comment.
なんか取れなかった。
時代が変わった時に、その次の時代の人は、そのアクセ
How
プ
about Tomoko?
次の時代。
次の世代の人たちも。
You mean accepting this change?
Yeah, when our contemporaries all around us start passing, is it easier to think that, I mean, easier to accept my own passing as well? Because being here past all my contemporaries, it can be very lonely as well. Yes, no?
Yes.
When I was younger, I think that was very hard to accept death of myself or of my late husband. But getting older and seeing so many people passing away, and then I'm getting old, and it's really sad to see other people I know disappearing, but still I feel more peaceful in accepting this death or changes compared to my younger age.
Thank you. How about you, Michael or Geneva?
Well, I think that it very much brings it to mind when you have, people, the contemporaries who are dying. It reminds you, this too will come to you. It's sort of something you can't avoid, and makes it more real. Sometimes I look in the newspaper of the obits. There's so many older than me and not many younger than me. Okay, I'm still doing okay. Sort of making sort of light on it. But yeah, I think it definitely brings it to mind and makes you realize this is you're on the conveyor belt, still moving.
And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that through the process of listening to the Dharma, we have been listening to the fact that change is a reality. So I think it makes it a little easier for us to accept. I do know that without that understanding, it could be a little bit frightening, I think, or I wouldn't feel as some people ask, why we Buddhists talk about death all the time. And my answer to that is that in talking about death, we're also talking about life, because they're actually one and the same. You don't have death without life. and conversely, life exists because there is death. And so I think we talk about death to remind ourselves because sometimes we forget about it. And that could be a very dangerous thing, I think. So when we start discussing it or thinking about it, it also makes us contemplate life and what I'm doing right at this moment. So, so that's where we talk about the right thoughts that come about. So 13 and 14, do I have somebody that can read 13 for us?
I'll read it.
Okay.
13. As rain leaks into a poorly thatched house, greed enters into an undisciplined mind. 14. As rain does not leak into a well-thatched house, greed does not penetrate into a disciplined mind.
Okay. So, we've had the historical rains here in the last couple of days. And I can't help but be grateful that because we built the Wisteria place next to us, as part of that, we were able to renovate our temple. So over the summer, we actually had our whole roof redone here at the temple. And I can't help but feel grateful for this because in previous years, we had cedar shakes for the roof. And so over the past number of years, there have been quite a few leaks in our ceiling. And so our former president, Bud Sakamoto, would have to go up and he would get these tin sheets of metal and he would stick it under the shakes. But lately, it seems like there's more metal than there was shakes. And so over the last couple of days, when we had these historical rains, it was so nice not to have to go and look to see, oh, it's leaking here or it's leaking there. I better get a bucket for this drip. I better get a bucket for that drip. So I can really relate to this one where it says, as rain leaks into a poorly thatched home, greed enters into an undisciplined mind. So definitely, as we, it's very straightforward, is that the disciplined mind is like controlling or thatching the roof. Interestingly, there is another passage in one of the earlier texts of this, the Buddha Dharma, in which they talk about this ill-thatched house, and that the leak from the roof, and the wisdom, I guess, from 2,500 years ago is quite profound in that they say the leak from a roof can actually affect the foundation of the house. And so, and it is quoted in one of the earlier texts of this Buddha Dharma. And so what it's talking about is that, the leak in the roof might just be a surface or something that you think is up there, but it can affect the root, the base of your existence. So that's why discipline is very important, because it's not just a momentary thing, but through discipline, you strengthen your foundation of your existence. So that's why it's very important to be mindful of our actions. Yet, it's also a very, very difficult thing to do. Very easy to talk about, but also very, very difficult to do. And that's why we do live in houses that actually have leaks and spring leaks, because we aren't on the ball all the time. And that's exactly what a leak is that you let it go to disrepair and it starts leaking. And so similarly, I think, unless we're really, really mindful, it's very easy for us to be forgetful of our thoughts. And then things like greed, ego, this all comes in, right? So you, as people, if you do something good and people praise you on that, you think, oh, I'm becoming, very good. And then again, that can create all sorts of problems. So always being grounded, realizing the interconnectedness, even in a leaky roof, that it can affect our foundation. So always being mindful of that is very important. And again, these two lines, I thought, especially over the past 2 days, were very, very appropriate, or we were able to. Did anybody see, I saw pictures of Highway 99. Actually, Kathy, who's working at the front desk at Wisteria, she comes from up that direction on her bicycle to work. And she actually showed me on her phone a picture of Highway 99, and it was completely flooded between, where was it? Westminster Highway and up to Bridgeport, I think, in between there somewhere. It was completely flooded. I couldn't believe it. Never seen anything like it before. Was anybody affected by the rains, by the way?
Oh, yes.
You were okay on the island?
Yes, we're in Duncan, we're in the higher area. We're not in the flat. So we were okay. Tons of flooding in the lower areas.
My sister in Vernon was in the higher areas, but I think of the poor people in Merritt, they had the forest fires in the summer, and now they're out of their houses because of the rain.
In Vernon, all the produce is gone. There's no dairy products. There's no produce anywhere. Our neighbor said she's looking for milk for her children. Yeah, because nothing can get through, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, we can. We're actually completely cut off right now, the lower mainland by road.
That's right.
Okay.
Anyways, we shall go on. So who would like to read 15 and 16 then?
これがなかった。
We have a volunteer.
Well, I can try read
Sure.
the 15. The Evildar, sorry, I can't see it very well. Evildor grieves both in this world and in the hereafter. Seeing his own evil deeds, he grieves.
Okay, thank you.
That's enough.
Thank you, Jun-san. Thank you for giving it a try. So what's really important here, though, is that in this passage, they're talking about an evildoer who is actually recognizing that what he did was wrong. So if you don't recognize what you did was wrong, you keep on doing it, right? And it's only once we start realizing, oh, this is not right, that we begin to fret over it, we begin to mourn over it, and that can consume us in this life and in the future as well. So when you think about it, when you think about our right now, the ecological crisis that we're in, all through most of my life, we were really not that conscious of what we were doing. when plastic bags first started being invented. Plastic was touted as the greatest invention of mankind. You know, you can wrap things up and you can, you know, make all these containers and, you know, Tupperware sales. Didn't you have Tupperware parties? That's before my time, but we probably had Tupperware parties and right. So plastic was being really touted, and everybody thought nothing of it. Right? It was good. It's wonderful. We could store all our stuff. We could, but now we begin to realize what we have done to our earth and consequently to ourselves. And now we're all very concerned about what we're doing. But you see, that's because we became conscious of the fact that what we're doing is really affecting us. Until that moment of realization, though, we continue to do things. And there's probably many things that we're doing right now, even, that we're not conscious of, that we're affecting the future. It's only when we begin to see it, we begin to be concerned. And so here they're talking about the evildoer who has come to that realization. And usually that realization only comes about when it begins to affect you, right? Until such time, we really, and that's the ignorance of our human being, all of us, is that we don't do it until it really affects you. I have a confession to make. I'm a borderline diabetic right now. And so that means I have to really start being conscious of my eating habits, and I have to exercise more. And it's only until very recently that I know this up here, but until I begin to see it in actual figures through test results, I still think, oh, I'm still young enough. I don't have to worry about this. But it's coming to me now that I have to start changing my habits. And again, that's because it's affecting me physically now, or I can see actually numbers, right? And so I think that's all of us are basically like this. And so this one here is very important for us in that when we do realize what the next passage then, so we'll go to 16, and I'm just going to read 16 then. The one who has accumulated merits rejoices both in this world and the hereafter. Seeing the purity of his actions, he rejoices. So there is a way, you know, rather than regretting our existence, if you find the passage or path that can bring you joy, then you can live without regret. And that path here, when they're talking about accumulating merits, okay, this in Buddhism is basically letting go of the ego and thinking of others or doing for others. There's in Japan, one of the earlier schools of Buddhism is what we call the Tendai. It's a form, it came from China originally, Tiantai in Chinese, but the Tendai school was founded by a monk by the name of Saicho. And Saicho was back when he was alive, and I believe that was, I could be wrong, it was 900 AD, 900 or 1000 AD. I'll have to look my notes. But when he was alive, Buddhism was actually controlled by the imperial imperial court in Japan. So Buddhism entered, the way Buddhism entered Japan is very different from how Buddhism entered into China. So Buddhism entered China through the Silk Roads, through the traders. And, you know, you recall the Bamyan Buddhists, that the Taliban blew up those large statues of the Buddhas. Well, that was part of the Silk Road. And in fact, those large statues acted as beacons for weary travelers. They knew there's a place that they could get rest and recuperate. And so, yeah, it just dawned on me that I guess those would have been your motel signs of today. Back then, it was the large statue of the Buddha. Never thought of it that way before, but anyways, so Buddhism entered China from India very much as a grassroots movement. It was these monks that were traveling from India through China. And so it was a very much common people's movement. Whereas in Japan, Buddhism was introduced to the imperial court, and primarily through one individual. Shotoku Taishi is his scroll is actually, oh, maybe I should. Okay, so his scroll is actually to my far right of the Onaijin, Shotoku Taishi. He was a regent prince, and he actually officially brought in Buddhism into Japan. So what that meant was that Buddhism was very much controlled by the imperial court early on. And so if you wanted to go and study, you have to get the permission of the imperial court. And so Saicho went to China to study his Tiantai, and he brought it back with him. And he founded this, he was given the option of where he wanted to start a school. And he chose to open his school in a place called Mount Hiei, which is northeast of Kyoto. And on Mount Hiei, he created this, basically the whole mountain. It's almost like a university of Buddhism. There are numerous temples throughout this mountain that belong to this Tendai school. In fact, later Buddhist schools, including our school, came out as an offshoot from this Tendai school of Buddhism. So anyways, Saicho is known as one of the great early leaders or Buddhist teachers in Japan. And when he founded Mount Hiei, one of the passages that he is quoted as saying is, in Japanese we say, mo ko rita, which means to lose the self,
We've had enough
to lose the self and do for others. Okay. And that was the ultimate act of Buddhist act of dana. And dana means selfless giving. So when you think about this word dana or selfless giving, it's really a paradox almost, because there is no such thing as a selfless giving, right? How can you give without the self? What this actually means is giving 100% of yourself so that the ego is not there. When you're giving fully of yourself, you're not thinking about, well, how is this benefiting me, right? When we're only giving 80%, we're still thinking there's still the self involved in there. And so instead of when you're truly giving, you're 100% giving, that thought of self is completely not there. And so the greatest act of dana or giving is to forget the self and help others. So moko rita. So this is what Saicho said. So moko wa 己を忘れて他を利する。An easy way, so Setouchi Jakucho, who was she just passed away. She was a very famous Tendai nun. Setouchi, I think she was Tendai. I could be wrong, but she is quoted as saying an easy way to remember that in Japanese. This is just for Japanese speaking people. Mo korita. If you can remember that phrase, mo korita,
Yes.
then you can remember the characters. Mo korita, this is a pun on the 4 Japanese characters that means to forget the self and to think of others. Mo korita can also mean, oh, I'm just tired. I've had enough. I've had enough. So it's a very common Japanese phrase. So the Setouchi Jakusho said for people to remember it easier, if you just say mo korita, then you can remember. Okay. Anyways, sorry about that. I went off tangent there. So this merits that we're talking about here in 16, it's not merits in the sense of I'm doing something for my benefit. It's completely reverse of that. Okay. Merits here is talking about giving of myself 100%, forgetting an ego. And through that, I rejoice, I find joy, right? And think about it. Think about when you find the greatest joy is when you're doing actually something for somebody else, whether it's a cause, whether it's, if you reflect upon your own life, the greatest moments of happiness probably come about when you've contributed something to a greater cause. There's a sense of pure joy that comes from that, right? So, and I think that happens in all our lives, is when we realize that we do something that we give of ourselves 100%, we feel satisfaction in that. Are there any comments or questions to that, to those two? Anyone that hasn't spoken? Suizone or Nobu? Francis? Anything?
I was just thinking that's sort of along the line of volunteerism and how, when people volunteer, that's you do it for somebody, but really you benefit from it as well.
Yeah. And you're right. True volunteer, it's the joy of you receive joy in volunteering, right? It's not because you're expecting something at the end, but the volunteering itself is the joy. And that's it's funny you mentioned that, because that's actually one of the secrets or one of the reasons why we have like temple bazaars or the Obon festival or all these things. They're quote unquote fundraisers, but more importantly, what it is bringing Sangha together, community together, and that's where you find the greatest joy. One of the things I often mention is that I probably have one of the most gratifying occupations in the world, and the reason why I say it's gratifying, one of the reasons I say is that gratifying is that I get to eat all these, as a borderline diabetic, I shouldn't be saying all this, but I get to eat all these wonderful things that are made when we when we have bazaars, not the actual bazaar food, but during the prep time, we have all these meals together, you know, and they're all the home cooked meals, basically, right? And if I was working in a very different business setting, that's one of the benefits I probably wouldn't have. And so that is the joy of when the Sangha is getting together. Everybody is happy because we're pitching in together for something, right? So anyways, so why don't we go on to 17 and 18? Tanis, would you like to read the 17 and 18?
Still can't hear.
Oh, no, that's right. Your mic is something's wrong with it. Sorry about that. I forgot. Yeah. Oh, Hugh, you're there. Okay, Hugh and Muddy, you read 17, 18.
Okay, suffering here and suffering in the hereafter. In both worlds does the evildoer suffer. Thinking I have done evil, he suffers all the more in the evil realm. Number 18, being happy both in this world and in the next. The one who has accumulated merits is happy. Thinking I have done good deeds, he rejoices all the more in the good realm.
So what are your thoughts on this? Anyone?
Well,
The context of the world they're in, they dwell on that side of it.
See, this is one of the reasons why I think some scholars don't believe maybe this was used as a way of controlling the Sangha as opposed to maybe what Buddha might have said, because especially when you look at 18, it can be misinterpreted, or it can be taken that, you know, I've done good, I'm happy, I've done good, right? You can inflate your ego doing this. So Ted, maybe you have some thoughts on that.
Well, I have mixed feelings regarding that because if you do volunteer and you feel you've done a good job and you feel that others have benefited from it, the opposite in yourself, when you're thinking, oh, I did a good job and I feel good, then the mixed part that is the ego. My ego is being stroked, I guess. And that's the part that I have mixed questions about, I guess.
So, and I don't know if this is, now I have heard some commentary saying that a lot is lost in translation.
Exactly.
So maybe when it's, because I have a feeling it's not necessarily rejoicing in the thinking I have done good deeds. I don't think that's it. I think it's just rejoicing in doing the deeds itself. Like it's not the outcome, right? So there is another version of this. I'll have to look it up. So according to, there was a Theravada monk who translated it into English, and he was critical of some of the translations, saying that they took too liberal interpretations of some of these passages. And I'm not quite sure, it just seems kind of off, this, to me at least, saying, you know, I have done good deeds and rejoicing in that as you said, Ted, that's stoking the ego, maybe, could be. Could be.
まあ、よく考えるね、みんな。
Does anybody have any contrary thoughts to that or think otherwise, or how do you perceive these passages?
What's in this one?
Well, when a person has done some good things in their lives, you know, I often hear elders reflecting on their lives, and when they can say that the things they've done, that they value the things that they've done. Not so much like, I mean, you can hear somebody who has a huge ego saying, I did this and I did that, you know, and they want strokes for it. You know, you can tell almost seeking. But this is more just kind of like an internal satisfaction, being able to say that in some way your life, it feels like it was worthwhile, that you made a difference, you know, that you gave something back. Those to be able to recognize the merit in what you've done, with, I guess, with a degree of gratitude that you've been able to do it. You know, that's the kind of wisdom I hear from people sometimes, and it's quite inspiring in its own way, because it encourages others. Oftentimes, you know, people say, you know, she did a lot of good things in her life, and she is therefore an inspiration to me. It's sort of like good brings about good by its very nature sometimes. So yeah, it's not all one way or the other with these ones. I find it's, you know, just reading those, it just seems like, yeah, I can see both sides of that coin in a sense.
Thank you for that. And yeah. I mean, I guess rejoicing in the good things that have been accomplished is good. But I guess we have to be careful that it isn't stoking our own ego. We can rejoice collectively in something that benefits all mankind. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, you gotta not let the ego leak into your poorly thatched roof.
Yes. Okay, so
one question before you go.
yes.
He is saying being happy both in this world and the next. Now, why is he including that next? Is that a life?
So in this case, you can actually think of next life as next moment, even.
Moment.
It doesn't necessarily have to be a complete, you know, next life as in literally next life, but just in the future. So in other words, if you're doing, putting it very simply, if you're doing good, the results will follow in the future. Conversely, if you're not doing well or not doing good, you will also, those things will, and this is all about karma is what it is. Yep. So, you know, if our intentions are there and our will is there and we're trying to do our good, then you know, the results will follow. So not necessarily a whole lifetime away, but even next moment, tomorrow, you know, those things will come about.
Okay, thank you for that answer. Very nice. Yeah.
You're welcome. So the next two, we'll stop after the next two. Though he may commit to memory large portions of the teaching, if he neglects to practice the teaching, he is like a cowherd who keeps tabs on the cows belonging to another. He is not worthy of being a mendicant. Though he may commit only a small portion of the teaching to memory, if he should practice in accordance with the Dharma, detach himself from greed, anger, and ignorance, attain wisdom and emancipation, and he unattaches to this world and the next, he is worthy of being a mendicant. Okay, so there are a number of passages that reflect these two lines. There's one very famous one of two brothers, Sri Pandaka, and I can't remember his brother's name. Sri Pandaka is one of the great disciples of the Buddha. But in fact, so he and his brother were in a village, raised in a village. And when they heard that the Buddha and his disciple were coming to the village, his brother, his older brother, and whose name, sorry, slips my mind right now. His older brother was, by all intents and purposes, the person that could do everything, you know, very athletic, very smart, very handsome, you know, whatever accolades you can have, the older brother seemed to have. So from the villagers' perspective, they all thought he would make a wonderful disciple of the Buddha because he's so accomplished as he is. Now, conversely, Sri Pandaka was known to be a little slow. And to put it bluntly, he was almost considered the village idiot. So when Sri Pandaka sort of implied or thought, you know, would the Buddha accept me as a disciple? All the villagers scorned at him, saying, no, your brother's one thing, but you're another case altogether. But of course, when Sri Pandaka approached the Buddha welcomes him. Now, Sri Pandaka had a very difficult time. He couldn't even remember 4 lines of the sutra at one time. And so, you know, he was having real struggles with following the rules or what the monks were supposed to do. And so the Buddha actually gave him a job. And he said, your practice is to sweep the inner court, the yard of our monastery. That's your practice. So every morning, Sri Pandaka would get up and he would sweep the yard of the monastery. Next day, of course, there will be some leaves that have fallen, maybe some litter on the ground. And again, Sri Pandaka would have to sweep that all up. And this went on apparently for quite I don't know how many years, but it says he finally attained enlightenment from his practice. And it was said that he approached the Buddha and he said, I understand what you are teaching me. And he said, my cleaning of the yard is the cleaning of my mind. Every day I clean the yard, but the next day it's littered again. And that's exactly like, that's my mind. And it was said that Sri Pandaka attained enlightenment and he became, in fact, one of the great disciples of the Buddha. And his forte or his specialty became following the duties or practices. He was known for being able to follow the practices. So again, here is an example. Even though he wasn't able to memorize all the sutras, the teachings, he was diligent in the one practice that he had. So if you can be diligent in that one practice, then you can have, it's more important than memorizing 1,000 lines, but it has no meaning to you, right? And when there's a passage on number 19 where it says, it's like a cow herd who keeps tabs on the cows belonging to another. There's a Japanese adage, and in Japanese we say, "Uma no mimi ni nembutsu," right? Which uma is horse, And if you translate it into English, it's whispering the Nembutsu or the name of the Buddha to the horse's ear. Okay, that's sort of similar to this, what this is saying here. It really has no meaning. You can whisper, profound thoughts to the horse's ear. Well, unless your horse is very intelligent and understands what you're talking about. But to the horse, it really doesn't have any meaning to it. And similarly, just memorizing words or lines really is secondary to finding that fundamental, what is fundamentally important. And so by committing to that practice, one could detach themselves from greed, anger, and ignorance. Okay, so that's what the 19 and 20 is saying. So we completed one section of the Dhamma. We'll continue on next time with going forward. Is this format okay with you? Are you guys okay with this? Or?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so I'd like to close with the Nembutsu, so please join me in Gassho. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. For those who may not understand, Gassho means to place your hands together in front of our chest. And then Nembutsu is the recitation of the name of the Buddha, Amida Buddha. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sensei.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.